Let me introduce you to an app that we love called Anchor. Anchor allows you to create and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. We use Anchor to create our podcast, and it makes it so easy for us to do. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more places. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello and welcome to A Bit Above Podcast.
I'm Audra.
And I'm Hadassah, and we are two average women living oceans apart. Our show displays a reachable lifestyle where we work to be better versions of ourselves in our day-to-day life. We know that the constant strive for perfection can lead to anxieties and disappointment, so we make changes that enhance our lives without giving up the things we love. Join us each week as we chat about motherhood, positivity, feel-good stories, relationships, and everything in between. All right, guys, I'm going to keep this introduction super quick because there is a lot of music going on in the city right now. It is a Jewish holiday today, so all the streets are filled with loud Israeli music and cars honking and I don't know, Corona, whatever. This episode, we got to talk to Lindsey Brown, who is a mama who came on to share her journey to start a family and her loss she experienced with one of her children. We talked to her about her family and how they continue to stay strong and the willingness she has to help others who go through this too. Her story is real, informative, and shows the strength that a person can have when going through the hardest times in life. She was such an amazing woman to chat with. It's a longish interview. We just couldn't stop talking about things. It was really so inspiring and so amazing. Even while we were editing, we really wanted to cut it down to a little shorter, but there was nothing that we felt like we wanted to take out because everything that she said was so real and so pure and honest. And we're just so lucky to even get to talk to someone like her. And let's get right to it. Here is Lindsey. Hey, Lindsey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Cold.
Good. She is not cold. I'm cold.
It's
are you
chilly.
cold?
Okay, stop.
She can still go outside without a jacket on. Not even chilly.
Oh, well, yeah, then that's not cold. I'm in Oklahoma. We're only about 45 miles from the Texas border. So I'm kind of in South Oklahoma. It's been a crazy 10 days. We had like sub-zero temperatures last week that kept us out of school a couple of days. And then Saturday night, the big front came in and we got several inches. And then we had a break for a day. And then we got another front that came in and got several more inches. I think in my town, got like 13 inches, which is the most I've ever seen in my lifetime. And wind chills like 20 below zero. So it was interesting, but we were very, very lucky. Never lost power, never, our water didn't freeze up or anything. So very, very blessed because I know there's lots of people suffering right now.
Wow. Does Oklahoma see snow usually?
Rarely. What they're dealing with in Tennessee sounds more like what we normally get, but this was like fluffy, legit snow.
What did the kids say when they were like, what is this snow? Wow.
Oh, they were amazed, had to go outside and jump in it and do all the snow angels and make snowmen and everything. It's the most that any of them have seen in their lifetime. My oldest, he'll be 12 in June. And when he was a baby, he was like 6 months old, we had kind of they called it a blizzard then, but it was more like an ice storm. And then it snowed on top of it. And it was really bad like this. Lots of people lost power and water lines froze up and stuff. But he was so little that he didn't remember.
It's hard with the ice. When you get the mixed precipitation in ice forms, I live in New Hampshire. So we're equipped and we're kind of used to case scenarios. But when it's ice, irregardless, that stuff is horrible. There's you're just stuck. It's just crazy. Ice doesn't mess around.
No, it doesn't. And 4-wheel drive doesn't help. And so this was actually a little easier to maneuver because it was snow. But, we're just not equipped to deal with this much. So they plowed the main roads, but that was about it. I mean, we didn't get mail for a few days because the mail trucks couldn't even get down in our neighborhood. So.
Can you tell us about yourself, about where you're from, about what you do, about your family?
Well, I am 34. I'm originally from here in Lawton, Oklahoma. Been here my whole life. I've been married to be 13 years in April. So we got married when we were really young. And we have 3 children. Brody, our oldest son, will be 12 in June, like I said. And then we have a son named Brooks that is 6 and a daughter named Bellamy that is 3. And my husband and his dad own a salvage yard here in our town, which is why we will never move anywhere else because family-owned business. And I work at my children's elementary school in the kindergarten. I'm a paraprofessional and working on going back to get my teacher certification. Funny, when I was in college, I was like, I never want to be a teacher. I don't like other people's kids. I couldn't do that. I don't have the patience. Then I was a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years after our daughter was born. And we were on the PTO and ended up becoming friends with the principal/superintendent because we are in an independent school district. So he's all encompassing. And he called me one day and he was like, hey, I need some help up here. Do you want to come and work? And you'd have the same schedule as the kids and all of that. And I was there for about a month and I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I just found my calling at 32 and I absolutely adore it. So I have 21 kindergartners as well.
Wow.
That's sweet.
Kindergarten, in my opinion, is the best grade, but I may end up moving around eventually, but I definitely want to stay with the younger kids. So it's really cool to see them come in at the beginning of the year and they're still kind of reviewing letters and sounds. And then by the end of the year, they're reading and taking AR tests and writing full-blown sentences. So they have so much growth during kindergarten that it's amazing to see.
You must see their personalities too. I mean, I could just imagine like all these shy kids, whether they had siblings back home or not, and then they're all in like a classroom. Now, are they in a classroom or are you doing virtual?
Well, we did virtual this week because of the weather, but no, we've been in school since August. We've had a couple of periods where the numbers in our county got higher. So we had to go on distance learning for a few days. But luckily, those kind of coincided with some holiday weekends. So we weren't out of school for more than, I think, 4 days virtual at a time. So it's been great. We did that whole period last year from the middle of March till the end of the year where we were distance. We didn't know what was going on with the pandemic. But our school has been great. They brought in a ton of resources. We have extra filtration in every single classroom. We have a hand sanitizer station. I think you can't go more than 10 feet on our whole campus without there being a station to get hand sanitizer.
I feel like I have that in my house, like literally a little station when you come in the door now. And when I saw this meme of a guy that put a shower curtain, like he put like a whole shower setup when he walked in the door, you step into his shower. And I thought it was genius. Everyone else laughed at me.
Oh, no, it was hard for me to get used to, but now I love it. I mean, the kids, I greet them at the door every morning, take their temperature, and then we have a hand sanitizer, station right there as soon as they walk in. So they get their temperature checked and I say, get some hand sanitizer, we elbow bump and they go put their things away. We do stations for reading and math. So every time we rotate stations, everything gets wiped down, everybody gets sanitized. So we've actually been really, really lucky. We've had some cases in our school, but my teacher and I, we are very diligent with it. So no kids in our class have gotten it. So we've been really, really proud of that we've taken the extra steps to make sure that, we are keeping things clean and sanitized. So it's great. But back to what you said about their personalities. Our school is pretty small. And so a lot of the kids there are siblings or, related to somebody that it's a tiny little community. But even if you don't know the kids, within about, I don't know, maybe like half of the first day, you can tell, oh, that's an only child. That's the baby of the family. That's the oldest. That's because there's just those personality traits that you've seen. I don't know if it has to do with the Enneagram. I've never taken that test, but I've always seen the stuff like these are personality traits of the oldest child. These are of the youngest. And usually those are pretty spot on.
You said earlier, like when we talked before, that you were a morning show host.
Yes.
So was that also in Oklahoma?
It was right here in my hometown. It was crazy how that all happened. When I met my husband, his parents were friends with the man that he was the program director at the local country station. And just to give you an idea of the size of our town, we have like one country station and one pop station and one rock station. That's about it. And he was out at not at the time, my in-laws, but what would become my in-laws' boathouse for the weekend. And he and I were talking and he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I work part-time at a pharmacy, but I'm in school. Asked me what I was majoring in. I said, communications. I said, I really want to be Katie Kirk. Great. So I started coming in on weekends when they would have the live broadcast at car dealerships and furniture stores and whatnot. They were really big back then. So I did that for only about a couple of weeks. And then he said, hey, we need somebody to host overnights. So he showed me how to pre-record everything. And I would go in the evening time. And my shift was from midnight to 6 a.m. And so I would record, that midnight gap. And did that for a couple of months. And then the morning show co-host, it was him and another man. He was going on a week-long vacation. And David called me and said, hey, do you want to come fill in for the week while Clay's out? And I said, sure, that sounds like fun. So I went in for the morning show that week, and everybody really responded to having somebody younger. I was 20 at the time. And so they responded to having a female perspective, somebody that was really into like the current stuff with music. He, of course, had been in the business like 25, 30 years. So, he was very well versed on 80s and 90s country, but I was really big into what was going on here and now. And so they liked that perspective of it. And so I didn't leave after that. Did that for a couple of years. And then after we got married and decided that we were going to buy a house and want to have a baby, the schedule is crazy. I know you guys hear them talk about it on the Bobby Bone Show. Bobby says that he'd do it forever if they could do it in the evenings, because it does. It wears on you to, get up at 4 o'clock and head in at 4:30 and prep for an hour and then do the live show. It does take its toll eventually.
I want to get to your story because I know that we want to dive deep into that. I want you to start in the beginning of your journey to motherhood.
Okay, so my first experience with motherhood was actually easy and somewhat of a surprise. My husband and I got married in April of that year, and I have always had hormonal trouble. I suffer from endometriosis, always had, terrible cramps and things like that. And so it was really hard for me when my husband and I got married to find a birth control that was not making me sick, that, I wasn't having crazy problems with. And one particular pill that I was on I was having terrible migraines. I wasn't hardly able to function. So I went back to my doctor and he said, okay, we'll pull you off of that. I'm going to put you on something else, but let's wait a cycle to see, to get that all out of your system, and then we'll start fresh. And in that month, I got pregnant with my oldest. So very, very unexpected. We'd only been married about 6 months. And so, of course, we were scared to death. We had no money and didn't know that we would be able to keep another human alive. But he's obviously, one of my biggest blessings. He was such an easy baby that it just made it all worth it when he came. It was like, okay, God knew what he was doing. He gave us the good one. So after that, we knew we wanted more children, but at that time we only wanted 2, period. And we wanted to wait a couple of years. My sister and I are about 6 years apart, and we thought that was too big of a gap. So we wanted them to be like 2 to 3. So we didn't try for the first couple of years. And then we decided, okay, we think it's time for another baby, and started trying. And we just weren't having any luck. And I know anybody that's dealt with infertility can agree with me when I say every single month when you take the test or when your cycle comes, it's another devastating blow. You just feel like your body's failing you. What am I doing wrong? What's going on? So I ended up going to my doctor, and he said, well, the longer you are off birth control, we're not managing the symptoms of your endometriosis, which is getting worse, and it's going to be harder for you to get pregnant. So we need to do this quickly. So we talked about some of the options that we had. Well, he ended up putting me on the oral medication, Clomid. And I was convinced at that point that we were going to have twins. They run in my family. And then to be on fertility medicine, I was like, it's just a given. We're going to have twins. So I was on that for 6 months. And he said, usually I would do this longer, but we're going to do a double dose and do it for 6 months. And if you don't get pregnant in 6 months, then we need to explore some other options. And backtracking just a little bit, we had all the other testing. I mean, I had my tubes tested, my husband got tested, obviously all of that. We had at the time what they called unexplained infertility. We can touch on this a little bit later, but in the last couple of months, I've been diagnosed with celiac disease. And my doctor has informed me that can also be a culprit of some fertility issues. So enlightening that maybe that may have been playing a factor into it all those years ago. But on month 6 of Clomid, I got pregnant with our second son, and he's actually 5 years younger than our first. So it did end up taking us quite a while to have him. Then we decided that we wanted another one. Kind of came out of nowhere. We were like, okay, we think we want 3. So we decided, because we had so much trouble getting pregnant with our second, that we needed to start pretty quickly. So we started trying before Brooks was even 1, had several months where nothing happened, which I was still breastfeeding at the time. So we figured it was probably a long shot at that point. But right after he turned 1, I got pregnant and then lost the baby at 9 weeks. So we thought, okay, well, we'll just not be actively trying, but whatever happens, happens. Well, the very next month, I got pregnant again. And for some reason, I have always been the type with my pregnancies. Basically, as soon as we go to the doctor, I start telling people, at least our family, because I've always been really open about that and never really ashamed to talk about it if something didn't happen. But this time, something just felt different. And I had called to make an appointment with my doctor, and they couldn't get me in until after the first of the year. And I was going to be a little bit further along at that point. And I said, well, let's just wait until we go to the doctor and see what's going on. So I went January 3rd. It was my first appointment.
What year was this?
This was 2016. I had a 7-year-old at the time and then almost an 18-month-old. So went to the doctor on January the 3rd and went over to the hospital to get my first ultrasound so that they could check out measurements and whatnot, because I was already 15 weeks at that point. I had just put off the appointment a little bit. And I think now looking back, I knew something was wrong. It was kind of my subconscious. And that's why I put it off for so long, because normally I would go to the doctor at, 8 weeks. So went over for the ultrasound, and the tech was very quiet the whole time. And she ended up leaving the room, and she said, I can't tell you to get up yet. I know your bladder's full and all of that. She said, but just wait till I come back. So she disappeared for what felt like forever. And my husband wasn't with me because, this wasn't our first rodeo. I knew it was just a quick little checkup. And she ends up coming back and says, I talked to the radiologist, and we're having trouble finding one of your ovaries, and we need to send you over to your doctor for an appointment. And I said, well, my appointment with him is not until later. And she said, well, he's going to see you right now. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, something is wrong that she can't tell me. So they're sending me over there. So she ends up walking me to the back door of the doctor's office, and I go sit in a room, and they said, well, he's just working you in, so you're going to have to wait quite a while. So, I'm texting with my husband, and I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. And then the doctor comes in what seems like an eternity later and says, okay, in your ultrasound, we've detected something called fetal hydrops. And that is where the baby is not able to, it has something to do with the receptors in their brain. And the fluid that's supposed to pump through your body and, your heart pushes it out, it doesn't work properly. So ends up what happens is lots and lots of fluid builds up around the baby and in their heart. And most of the time, if they're not able to work through that during the pregnancy, they have heart failure and they end up passing away. There were indicators that possibly if he was able to make it through the pregnancy, that they would be able to help him once he was born. But at that point, my doctor said, I will never forget this. As he walked out, he said, we're going to do some more testing because we need to find the culprit of this. Usually it's caused by Down syndrome, but we need to do the blood test to make sure. He said, I'm going to go get your lab slip. And he turned around and he said, you need to gather your troops. And that was when I lost it, because I just knew, okay, so now they're presenting me with this impossible situation to deal with. So flash forward about a week or so, we get the results, and it was in fact Down syndrome. We went to a specialist up in the Oklahoma City area who confirmed everything that we had already talked about here. He also detected another heart problem that he had, which he assured us that pretty much any heart issue baby has can be fixed with surgery. I know kids that, have surgery right as soon as they're born or within a couple of months. So he wasn't as concerned about that. We were more concerned with him getting through the pregnancy and me making it through. Because with fetal hydrops, there's also a thing called mirroring syndrome. And the mother can start to take on the symptoms that the baby is having. And you can end up having cardiac issues and things like that, which I did end up having at the end of that pregnancy. So
how was your symptoms during the pregnancy? Like, did you have like regular symptoms?
At first, it was like a normal pregnancy. I did start showing quite a bit sooner than I had with the others. And that, I think that was just because of the extra fluid that was building up. My stomach just got bigger so much quicker. But as far as other symptoms, I didn't really have any until towards the end when they thought I was developing the mirroring syndrome. There was one day at work that I just could not breathe. I couldn't get up and walk. I would get really, really dizzy. And that's when one of my coworkers drove me to the ER, and at first, they wouldn't send me to labor and delivery because I was too early to obviously go be monitored up there. But the ER didn't know what to do with me. And then they finally said, we're going to call your doctor. And he admitted me into the hospital. I mean, they just hooked me up to everything, and they could not find a reasonable medical explanation as to what was going on other than I was starting to take on some of the symptoms and some of the distress that Bryson was having. It was scary to know that things were happening that they really couldn't even explain to me, because I guess it's not super common, and mirroring syndrome is even less common. So they just didn't really know how to treat me. So it was a lot of just bed rest and lots of fluids, and they would come and check my heart multiple times a day just to make sure that I wasn't having any other symptoms. So it was crazy, to say the least. In connection with all of the testing that we had done and all of that, they referred me to, it was actually my doctor's wife. She is an OB also, but she is a neonatal specialist. And so she had within her office the like level 2 ultrasound or whatever that equipment is, that it's a little bit better. And so I would go see her 3 times a week. I mean, every other day I was in her office getting an ultrasound so that we could measure the fluid and measure how he was growing, just to kind of see what was going on. So she and I became very familiar, her ultrasound tech and I became very familiar. So it was just kind of like clockwork, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was in her office first thing in the morning. So at that point, several times it had been brought up to me that we could end the pregnancy. Because we were basically told by our doctor, by the specialist, by the doctors in Oklahoma City that we had gone to see, that this was not going to end well. I mean, lots and lots of things had to align medically for him to survive. So that was really, really tough to even be presented with that information, because, growing up here, obviously it's a little more conservative in this part of the country. And so that's pretty taboo to even talk about, let alone be considering. I'm the type of person where I want all the information so that I can make an educated decision. So I took the information, I called different places to kind of see what that process would be like. And without going into too much detail about that, I just decided this is not a decision for me. I can't play God. I know that this is going to be difficult for me. I know it's going to be difficult for my family. But you hear stories all the time of people that, they've been presented with these impossible situations during pregnancy, and then the baby's born and they're healthy. And so I just know me too well. I suffer from a little bit of anxiety too. I didn't want to always have that nagging thing in my heart, wondering, could he have been okay? If I didn't do this, would he have lived? Now, that to say, I am very, very empathetic to anybody who has gone through something like this. Let me tell you, it is an impossible thing to even consider on either side. So while I am not pro-abortion, I don't believe in that for, birth control reasons or things like that. Just because of my faith, I would never judge or, bash on somebody that made a different decision, because not everybody had the family support that I had. Not everybody had, the medical insurance and resources to be able to take care of a child that we didn't know fully what he was going to be born with. Down syndrome, I learned after that. I have a friend that has a daughter with Down syndrome who is my oldest son's age. She's the only experience with Down syndrome I've ever had in my life. And she's very, very high functioning. I mean, she has gone to school with them their whole lives. Now she gets pulled out for special stuff, but she's right there in the middle of the mix. She's the boss of everybody. She has the best personality. And so I just assumed, oh, wow, I'm going to have a child like Kayla. It's going to be great. She has the best light. She's so special. How amazing that God might give us a child like this. And then I got to researching and talking to my friend that's her mother. And she said, now she's not every child with Down syndrome. They go up to Oklahoma City where they have classes for kids with special needs. And, they see children with Down syndrome that are wheelchair bound, that have issues with their colons. And so they have a colostomy bag for their entire lives. They have heart issues where they're having to have surgery every year. So we really didn't know the full extent of what we were dealing with. And that was very, very scary to me. I would never judge anybody that's in a situation like that, because you really don't know what you're dealing with as far as all the complications that come with it. And the fact that, with the mirroring syndrome and all that, my life could have been in danger. And I had two living, breathing children here on earth that I had to think about as well. Do I want to risk not being around for them at the chance that this baby might survive? And they're telling me that's really, really low.
Were your kids, were they in on the conversation at the time?
My oldest, he was 6 at the time. And so we presented it to him like, mommy has another baby in her tummy and the baby has some problems. He is sick. The doctors might be able to help him. We just have to be really, really patient and see if they're able to. And then when he's born, he's going to be like your friend Kayla. And, he might have to have surgery so that they can fix his heart and things like that. So we were very gentle with him. But he is my child with an old soul. So he was very understanding and very calm about it and really took it all in stride. And I have to give a big hats off to his first grade teacher at the time. She was looped in, obviously, because this was a traumatic thing that he was experiencing alongside us. And she was so wonderful to him and gave him the extra love and patience that he needed at the time to get through what we were going through. But yeah, he was right there with us in the conversation. Obviously, we didn't tell him that, baby might not survive and things like that. We just said that he's sick and, mommy has to go to extra doctor's appointments and we'll really see what happens the further along this gets. So we tried to be really open with him as much as we could on a 6-year-old level. So continued on with our 3 times a week doctor appointments and things like that. And I got put in the hospital with what they thought was the mirroring syndrome. It was the first week of February. So, we're already a month into all of this that we had been dealing with. And I stayed in the hospital for 3 days and they said, well, you're stable enough. We don't see any problems with your heart right now. Your oxygen's not dropping low enough to cause us any concerns, and you're not swelling as much as we think you might. So we're going to go ahead and let you go home, but we want you to take it easy and just, do things like you normally would, but also extra rest. So we just really tried to be mindful of that and take extra care of myself and continued on with those appointments. And I went in on February 11th for my normal, run-of-the-mill 10-minute checkup to see his size and the fluid and all of that. And I laid down on the bed and the ultrasound tech put the wand on me. And I looked at her and she started to cry. And I thought, okay, today's the day. And sure enough, I looked over at the screen and I could immediately tell there was no heartbeat. So my husband wasn't with me that day. He had gotten caught up at work that morning, so he was not there. And so she put the things down and she said, let me go get the doctor and I'll go call your husband. And she did. And it felt like about 30 seconds. And my husband was walking in and my mom was walking in. I don't know where I was for that time, because it probably would have at least taken them probably 15 minutes to get there. Our town's pretty small, but it still would take a few minutes to get there. And so they came in and said, well, now we have a choice to make. A lot of times your body will, work this out on its own, but you don't know when it will happen, where it will happen, how intense it will be. So we really would recommend that, you be induced and have him here at the hospital, or we can monitor and all that, because you'd have to come anyway. This way it's scheduled. Your doctor can be here to take care of you and all of that. This is one of the most traumatic parts about it. I called my office where I worked at the time. This was a big factor in me staying home for a couple of years after I had Bellamy. But there was only 2 of us in kind of admin positions at this brokerage firm that I worked for. And the other lady was out on a week's vacation getting a facelift. So I called and told my bosses in Tulsa what had happened and that they wanted to get me in for the induction and all of that. And they said, well, she's out, so you can't take off. So I'm a people pleaser. And I just said, okay, maybe we can get it scheduled this weekend. So asked my doctor and he said, yes, Monday's a holiday, so you'd be off work anyway. Can you come in Sunday night on Valentine's Day and we'll get the medication started? And barring that there's any big complications, you should be released Monday afternoon. Then you can go home. So we committed to that. There was a whole lot of, I guess, almost PTSD from that with my job. And I held a lot of resentment for that. I had to walk around from Thursday morning until Sunday evening, pregnant, but not pregnant, because they couldn't spare me away from the office. And I should have, I go back and I replay that a million times in my head. I should have said, no, this is a medical emergency. Send somebody from another office or roll the phones to another office. Or, hey, guess what? These brokers that are making $250,000 a year for what I'm helping them with, they can answer the phones for 2 days so that I can go and deal with the most traumatic thing that's ever happened in my life.
And you had to still go to work before anything happened.
Yes.
Okay, well, here's your chance to call them out by name and social security number. Wow.
Yeah. And I will say the people that I worked with on the local level, they were wonderful and very, very supportive. But the way that company was structured is, they were kind of independent contractors through the brokerage firm, whereas I was actually, my salary came from the firm as a whole. And then my brokers that I worked for could pay me bonuses and things like that out of their commissions. But my benefits and my salary and whatnot, it all came from corporate. And to them, you're just a number. And I don't think anybody really realized what exactly it was that I was facing. So yeah, I left the appointment that Thursday morning after finding out that he had passed, and I worked the rest of that day. And then I went to work Friday.
How did you separate your personal life and your professional life? Because that's a question that people need to know in general, but how do you do it in this situation?
I was wondering the same thing. I was like, how do you mentally go to work knowing, or just getting up and doing what would be quote unquote normal routine, knowing that this is going to incur in a couple of days because you had to make a date for it?
I will say those first 2 days were not as bad as the next week. So Monday was President's Day. I went back to work on Tuesday, and I worked Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then Friday was his funeral. So those 3 days, they were the worst. I think Thursday and Friday, I'm not sure. I probably answered the phones. I probably dealt with people that came in. But as far as really functioning to my normal ability, I'm sure I didn't. A lot of that leading up to it is kind of a blur. My oldest, and now my middle as well, but they race little go-kart sprint cars. So my oldest had a race in Wichita Falls that Saturday. And so, I got up and got our middle son ready and hopped in the car and drove to Wichita Falls and stayed at the races all day long. I think at that point, I was probably just trying to keep myself busy. So maybe a little bit of that normal routine was helping me to not focus on what was about to happen. Because I did have a breakdown when we got to the hospital that Sunday night. My husband and I dropped the kids off at my sister and her husband's house and went to eat dinner because they told me, you'll need to eat something beforehand. This is like a regular labor. We don't know how long it's going to last. We won't let you eat once you're here. So go eat dinner, try to do things as normal as possible, and then come that evening. And so he and I went out to dinner and then went straight to the hospital. And when we got up to the floor that labor and delivery's on, my parents, my in-laws, the preacher, there was a lot of people there to sit and support us. And I just had a full-blown breakdown. My father-in-law hugged me and I collapsed. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't walk back there knowing that when I leave, I won't have a baby. A little bit, I went crazy. I mean, I was screaming like, no, we need to do another ultrasound. Maybe they got it wrong. He's still alive. I can't do this. Don't give me the medicine yet. And they did. They appeased me. They brought in the little portable ultrasound machine and checked. And sure enough, it was confirmed. And so you go back to a very, very sad room. It's not a normal delivery room. It's more kind of a monitoring room, I guess you'd say. When you're not in full-blown labor, they send you to one of those little ones. And I don't know why they choose this, but in our hospital, there's a leaf on the door. And that tells hospital staff, the other nurses and whatnot, they know that if there's that leaf on the door, that the person in there is having a child that's already passed. And so I think it's just so people aren't coming in and out, hounding you for things. They try to give you as much privacy as possible, which is really nice. You only see, I've had 3 kids, obviously. So I've seen several nurses, they'll pop in and out to check on you. But this was you had one nurse that was dedicated to you. And then, my doctor would come in and out during the major stuff. So they try to keep it as private as you can with your family there, because they know how bad that is.
So you were surrounded by a lot of family then that was there, and that was helpful?
Yes and no. After he was born and, we all got to hold him and things before the funeral home came and took him. With family there at the beginning, but once he was born, I was very protective of him and the way that he looked. And I felt like, as his mother, I wanted to be the one to protect him and not have anybody look at him and think, oh, he's, I don't know why I felt this way. It was, looking back, it was irrational because they're our parents. It was his, his grandparents. Obviously they weren't going to feel that way, but I was like, I hope nobody thinks that, he's scary looking or not normal, because he, there were some issues and he was very small. He fit in the palm of my hand, or he was about the length of my hand. So at that point I wanted to be alone and people were popping in and out to say their goodbyes. But I recognize now that I'm through it, that they deserved to be able to say goodbye to him as well. He wasn't just mine, he was all of ours. And I can get into this. So they come in and give you medication and start the laboring process. And that was actually my only labor where my water broke on its own. All the other times I've had to have the doctor do it. And they got me in and started the medication about 5:00 on Sunday evening. And then he was born at 12:55 a.m. So several hours worth of labor. And that was actually, when you talk to people about, your labors and things like that, that was actually my worst. And I don't know if it was more the psychological part of it or the physical, but I felt physically like that was the worst one. For me.
Also, did they give you Pitocin or whatever it's called? Or
I got Pitocin, and then I got the pill that softens your cervix, because obviously your body's not ready yet. I was only a little over halfway through my pregnancy. My body was not ready to be doing what they were forcing it to do. So it was very, very uncomfortable. And then afterwards, my placenta did not detach and I wasn't able to deliver that. So they had to take me down for a D&C and put me out. So I had a lot of guilt from that too, because there was that portion of time that I was out of it that I didn't get to spend with him. And, of course, with that, you want every second because those are the only ones that you're going to have. So they brought me back into the room after that and got me situated and then brought him back in. And at that point, that's when they told me that they had called the funeral home and they came to pick him up. bar none, that's the thing that will always be a trigger for me, is them coming to take him. And it was something I wouldn't wish on anybody, because they wrap your baby up and they put him in a bag and then they leave the room and that's it. I mean, we do have a wonderful funeral home here in our town that when we went, so a couple hours after that, they discharged me and we went straight to the funeral home to plan the service. And that particular funeral home, I believe the story that's been floated around is that one of their family members had lost a child. And so they are very, very, aware of what kind of trauma that is for a family and how you're not usually prepared for that. So we go in to sit down and plan everything. And they tell us that it's totally covered, that they take care of all of the cost of that. The only thing that we had to pay for was the $15 death certificate, was filed with the state. And then, of course, when we went to the cemetery, we picked out his gravestone and all of that. And to kind of go way, way back to that, my mother and father-in-law, their very first child that they had in 1978, she was born and lived for a couple of hours and then passed away. And so when we went to the funeral home, my father-in-law had slipped my husband a piece of paper and said, this is the plot where your sister is buried. We're going to call the cemetery and see if they will let us open the other side of that to bury him with her, because, a child's burying spot is smaller than an adult. And so that way, our family can be together, because we have several other plots out there. My husband's grandfather's buried there, and his grandmother already has a spot next to him. They were gracious enough to let us do that. So my son is buried with his aunt, and they have the same grave marker, the same stone, and all of that. So
that's special.
That's really special. And it came full circle. When we got pregnant with our daughter, I went to my first appointment and they said, your due date, it was September 20th. And that is, that's what would have been my sister-in-law's birthday. And so as soon as I called my mother-in-law and I said, guess when my due date is? And she said, when? And I said, September 20th. And she said, it's a girl. They sent us a girl. She said, Stephanie and Bryson are, they're up there, and that's our sign that everything's going to be okay. And sure enough, my doctor wanted to be extra cautious. So we did all the, the blood work and genetic testing and all of that, again, to make sure that this pregnancy was super healthy. And so I found out at like 11 weeks that it was a girl. So sure enough, it was just like they said.
Wow, that's like goosebumps in places that I didn't even know could have goosebumps. Yeah,
very full circle moment. I've talked to lots of people since then who have had loss, and there's generally always kind of not an aha moment, but almost a moment where you go, okay, I have some peace with this because X, Y, and Z happened later. For my mother-in-law, it actually didn't come for her. She said her moment. Obviously, they had a whole lifetime after their daughter passed. They had my sister-in-law and then had my husband. She said she didn't really have her moment until one day I came home from work. She watched our oldest, her and my mom switched off days and watched him until he went to school. They were, first grandkids, so they were obsessed and wanted to keep him out of daycare. And I came home one day and she was rocking him in the chair and tears just streaming down her face. And I said, has it been a hard day? What's going on? And she said, no, I was just sitting here thinking if Stephanie would have lived, we would have just had her and Kim, and I wouldn't have Michael, and we wouldn't have you. And so it was, it was kind of her full circle moment of, hey, all of this stuff happened afterwards. And yes, that thing that we went through was so, so awful, but it led us here to this that's so wonderful. So
during that whole chapter, and even like later on, did you experience anything like what I call them in my life is like the little angels that they're not necessarily answers. They're not necessarily like resolutions. There's these little moments that it's usually a person, it's usually a person that comes into your life and like gives you a moment of comfort. Who were those angels for you?
Oh, hands down. My mother-in-law was probably one of the biggest, because my mom, as close as she and I are, and as much as she wanted to support me, she never even had an early miscarriage. So she had no idea the pain that I was in. But my mother-in-law, she knew firsthand. She had already buried a child. So she was one that was just always an ear for me to listen, to listen to me, someone for me to cry with. I went to therapy for quite a while afterwards, and I was angry with my husband because I felt like, and looking back and working through those feelings, he was just trying to be strong and supportive for me. But I was interpreting that as he wasn't grieving. And I was like, how could he not love this baby like I did? Why is he not crying all the time? Why is he not, breaking down? What is going on? And then, when he and I got really, really open and honest about it, I found out that he was driving out almost every day on his lunch break to visit, his grave. He was doing things when I wasn't around because he was trying to be really strong and hold me up. But the other person is my best friend, Jessica. She came into my life when my oldest started school. He and her daughter, who's her middle child, they've been in the same class together since pre-K, always kind of had this bond. They're like thick as thieves, but they fight like brother and sister. And then she and I were pregnant with my middle, her baby at the time. We were pregnant at the same time. Those boys are 3 months apart and have been best friends literally since the womb. And are still best friends. And one day we were all at her house, the kids were playing, and something was said about Riley's little sister. I was like, you have a little sister? And, it was still at that point in our friendship where we were sharing things, but, we didn't know everything about each other. And so she told me the story about their third child, who was another girl, and everything was going according to plan. She went in the day after Christmas for just a routine checkup and was told that she had had a placental abruption and the baby had passed. And she was 29 weeks, I believe, when that happened. And so she went through that story and was so open and honest about it. And I remember sitting at her kitchen table crying with her. And the thing that was going through my head was, wow, I hope that never happens to me. I can't imagine what that must feel like. And then, kind of like you said, I feel like she's a bit of an angel sent to me because she knew how to help me through that time, that week, or I guess 3 days in between when he was born and then the funeral. I was in a really, really bad spot. I was saying things that I didn't realize how dangerous they were, saying that I couldn't bear for them to bury him, that I just needed to go with him. I couldn't get through this. I can't get up. I can't get out of bed. She knew because she had gone through all of those same things. And she called a friend of ours who is a PA, and she said, we need to get somebody to see her right now. She might need some medication to get through this, but I'm worried that she's going to do something that she can't take back. They were afraid at that point that I was suicidal. And I was. I never said I'm gonna hurt myself or I want to hurt myself. But the other things that I was saying were very, very concerning. I credit her in a lot of ways with, saving me, because she recognized in me what she had gone through. And so she set up that doctor's appointment and they got me some medicine to get me through so I could function until after the funeral. And then actually set me up with the therapist that I went and saw for months and months afterwards, that really helped me process my grief after that and get to a point where I could talk about him. So yeah, she was absolutely amazing. And then I've met people since then that have just, supported me wholeheartedly. And I feel like in turn has helped me to share my story so that maybe I can be that person for somebody else.
Was there anything like Facebook groups or like support groups that you used or that helped you?
There wasn't, not at that time. I wasn't really, I went through a period when my kids were little that I didn't do a ton of social media. I don't even think I was on Instagram or anything at that point, and just kind of dabbled in Facebook here and there. So if I knew what I know now about, different groups and things like that, because not only, I'm in the B team group, but I'm in a group now that's kind of helping me manage my celiac and giving me ideas for recipes and things like that to do gluten-free. if I had realized then that there were groups out there, I probably would have utilized that, but I didn't. But I would definitely encourage anybody that's going through that now, definitely reach out, because sometimes the best people to talk to are strangers. I mean, they have no stake in your day-to-day life. They're not gonna, some people, they mean well, but they'll inadvertently say things that like, oh, well, you're fine, or you weren't that far along, or now, but you have other kids. People will say things that they're trying to be supportive and trying to make you feel better, and it misses the mark. Or there's people that it makes them so uncomfortable that they don't say anything at all. And to me, that's almost worse. We want to talk about our children because they are part of our family. They're a piece of our heart. They're one of the biggest parts of our lives that, helped us grow and evolve and be better mothers and be appreciative of everything we have and have more patience and more love and more grace. We're proud of them, and we want to create a legacy for them. They are not here on earth to create for themselves. I'm so glad that I had people that helped me push through that grief and become a better person, so that his legacy is not that his death ruined me, that his death made me a shell of who I could have been. I feel like his death actually improved me, in a lot of ways. It opened my heart to things that I never had thought that I would do before. I feel like teaching is one of those things. I didn't have the heart for it before, and now I do. And I feel like a big part of that was my growth after losing him.
Yeah. What are those things that you learned? Because, obviously you wouldn't wish that upon anyone, but there are those things that change your life, and they give you a whole new outlook and a whole new paradigm of how you see each day. So what are those things that you learned so that maybe you can teach it to us so that we can kind of benefit from your learning experience?
I just really feel like patience is one, grace is another. I try to extend that to my children, to my husband, as much as I can, because I will always pause and think, okay, is this worth it? If we didn't have tomorrow, is this worth me losing my temper over, or getting frustrated about, or, causing an argument over? Is it worth it? Or should I just wrap them in love and move to the next thing? It makes me stop and enjoy those little moments, not take the mundane of our day-to-day for granted. I just really feel like it's an appreciation as a whole, because you don't realize until you've had, that loss and that struggle of a baby, which I already had, some of that before, because we had struggled to have our second. But until you actually lose something, I don't think you fully grasp how precious it is, because I think as a society as a whole, we say, oh, well, women have been having babies for thousands of years. We don't need to do all this. We don't need to have the gender reveal. We don't need to have the big showers and all that. And, in a lot of ways that stuff's commercial and it's foo-foo and it's fun, but also it's celebrating, that you're bringing this new life into the world. And I was guilty of it too, of taking for granted that I was able to have these healthy children, so now I just really, really appreciate every little moment. And I look for those times in my kids where, okay, now they're growing to the next phase, or they're doing this, or they're saying this, or they did something kind. And I think this is why they're meant to be here, that I have a great responsibility to make them just a nice person. If they become a doctor or a lawyer or president or whatever, that's well and good, and I'll be proud of them. But I just want them to be good people and have compassion and love for others and do the best that they can to give back. So I think it really opened my eyes to more of that too, as your success in life is what you did for others. I really feel like that's true.
I see that. And so with my girls, they're much older, and everyone will come up to me like, all right, how did you and Corey ended up having such great kids? And, he was like a little hellion when he was a kid, and I was like this like goody two shoes per se. And I'm like, we just got really, really lucky. At the same time, I'm like, well, I also made sure that in raising them, that they had certain like morals and certain things that they would abide by, and they turned out really good. But I mean, it really does take a village sometimes to raise a child. And so I think, where you talked about having a lot of support, I know I had a lot of support, same kind of thing, small town, a lot of family, a lot of people who knew who you were. It really took like a whole lot of us to make sure that the children were molded in such a way. I'm proud of where they are now, but some days when they were younger, I was like, oh, how am I going to get through this?
Yeah, definitely. My oldest is, he was given to us when we were super young. And there were times where I thought, I can't do this. How am I going to, turn this little person into, a functioning member of society? But a lot of it, like you said, there is some luck that goes into it. I feel like some kids are just born special. I mean, you obviously encourage that and you do whatever you can to reinforce what they're doing. But there's so many things that he's done in his short little life so far that just blow me away. And, I'll get compliments on him and I'm like, I didn't tell him to do that. That was all him. He just has heart for service. He has a heart for others. One example I'll give, I mentioned earlier that my boys race and we had a really close family. Their grandpa was, he was at every race. He was kind of a honorary crew chief for everybody. He called the boys, his racing grand boys. So they were all kind of included in his fold. And they had gone to a big race over the weekend and my boys were there, spent the weekend with his family. And then Monday morning, he was driving to work and was hit head on by a driver that was under the influence of meth and alcohol at 7 a.m. And was killed instantly. So our racing community, one of the promoters that puts on races, started one in his honor and named it the Doug Cottrell Memorial Race. And so we went to that race about a month later and Brody won his division that he was in. So he got a trophy that had Doug's name on it. Her two grandsons that were racing in it, they didn't place in the top 3. So their family didn't have a trophy with his name on it. And Brody gave it to his widow. And he said, well, I just feel like Grandma Glenda would want one with Doug's name on it. And it's okay, because I know Papa Doug's still looking over us. I don't need a trophy. She probably would like it more. And I was like, my gosh, I think he was 8 at the time. I was like, what 8-year-old thinks of that?
That's so special.
Yeah, he's a very, very special boy. And he did that at another race with a boy that had special needs that kept coming to our trailer and wanted to hop in the car and all of that. And he ended up getting a plaque at that race. And he disappeared for a little bit and then came back and he didn't have his plaque. And I said, Brody, where did you go? And he said, oh, well, I went to give it to my new friend. He said, his mom said that because of the way he is, he didn't have Down syndrome, but he was special needs in some capacity. And he said, I heard his mom say that he won't ever get to race because of his problems. So I figured he would want a trophy. So, just things like that he's done in his short little life so far. People will tell me he's the best kid. I'm like, I didn't have anything to do with that. He has it in his heart that he wants to make others happy and do nice things for them.
With your story, there's so much that we can dive deep into about, self-growth and just like how you handle life. But obviously we can't have like a 10-hour conversation, right? But I just want to say, as a mother myself, and so I'm 23 and I met my husband at 20 and I was pregnant by like 21, 22. I don't even remember, to be honest. And then my baby's 6 months old. And just, I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I'm surrounded by really strong women. And so I can recognize a strong woman because I see them around me. And just hearing your story and hearing just the thing about where your boss like made you come into work and you did, and you just walked right in, and just how you were able to like conquer like mental toughness through loss, through motherhood, which motherhood is hard with or without loss, and relationships and marriage and all the things. It's hard. And just hearing you and the way you talk about your story and the way you talk about your kids and your whole face lights up, like your eyebrows literally go up and your face starts beaming. It's so empowering to me. The way that you also refer to your past and your story and your loss as like such a special like importance of your life. It's so empowering. It's anyone else who has experienced anything quite like yours would feel super just empowered by the way that you see your stories. I'm just honored that we got to hear it.
Thank you. That's so special to me to hear that. I mean, I feel like we say it, but God doesn't give us more than we can handle. And I didn't realize how strong I could be until I had no other choice. I did get buried in my grief for some time, but with the support of all the people that helped me, I was able to see, okay, I've got these 2 children here. It is my responsibility to be the very best that I can be for them. And, things are going to get better. Odd to say, but it even helped my marriage because, marriage is hard. We've been married almost 13 years and we've had some peaks and valleys and, times where we didn't sleep in the same room and we didn't speak. We'd come home and eat dinner in silence and didn't really even like each other. But now I know that all of the things that we've been through together, that trauma and that grief together, that's nothing that I would want to share with anybody else. I share my story to help other women and other families going through this, but the actual pain of that, nobody knows that like he does. And I would never want to share my heart in that way with anybody but him. So even on the days now where, we still get frustrated with each other, I'm like, you're the only guy for me, because I know, as crazy as our lives can be and as frustrated as we might get with each other sometimes, he's the only person that truly knows everything in my heart. He would die for me and our kids on any given day, no questions asked. I mean, he's everything to us. So I'm very, very blessed. There was times in the beginning of our marriage that I took that for granted too. We got married so young that I was like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? But now that we're older and we've been through all of that together, it's like, oh, but I wouldn't want to start over with anybody else, because you really are. At the end of the day, you make me laugh and you do everything you can to take care of us. So we're in it for the long haul for sure.
Don't they say that you always find the one that you want to argue with the most with? There's like no one else you'd rather argue with than your significant other.
It's like unfathomable to me to even think about starting over with somebody else at this point. I wouldn't want to. I don't know what I would do without him, because there's just, he just knows me so well. I couldn't do some of the crazy things that I do, Friday night dance party with our kids in the living room and just I'm a horrible dancer. But he just laughs and, goes on with it. I look like Elaine from Seinfeld, which Hadassah, you're way too young for that, but
I know who she is. I actually know who she is.
Well, we're going to have to video one of these Friday night dance parties. We'll let you know if you're like Elaine or not.
But the kids think it's funny. And heck, I even do it in the classroom. We dance to Kids Bop and all of that stuff. And my students are like, Miss Brown, you look silly. Like, yeah, but you're laughing and you're having fun. So just mind your business.
Yeah. 6 months into parenting, and I realized that if you don't know the words to the song, you still sing it anyways. You just make up the noises or...
No, wait a minute. That's at any age. We are 2 grown adults in a vehicle and one of us will start singing and we just put in our own words, but it still goes with the beat. So you just keep going.
Just keep going. Yeah.
I have one more question. I have 100 more questions, but I'm going to ask you one more. Okay. A lot of times I hear when I'm listening to podcasts where someone says oh, before you go, can you leave a little tip or leave a light or something like that? But I'll be a little bit more specific because it's a very general question. For someone who's in your situation, not your situation, right? In a situation like yours, where you just don't know how to wake up in the morning. It doesn't matter what the situation is, but you just can't imagine going to work and putting up a brave front. You can't imagine just seeing the light outside and whatever it is. What is just some kind of tip that you can give or some kind of light that you can give on how you got through it? Because I'm sure even though you're a strong women, they struggle too, right? It doesn't mean that they don't struggle. So what was something that helped you with your struggle?
I would say, one, you just have to take it, not even one day at a time. Sometimes when you're going through trauma like that, just 1 minute, 1 hour at a time, just set forward to something okay, if I can make it through this hour at work, then it's a lunch break and I can breathe for a minute. Or if I can make it through the afternoon, then I get to go pick up my kids and that gives me joy and I can get through the evening. Or, if it's a crazy evening, once I get the kids in a bath and get them calmed down, then I can rest and reset for the next day. So you don't put so much pressure on yourself to get over something quickly. Sometimes you just literally take it moment by moment and do the very best you can. And it's not always going to be perfect. One of my favorite quotes quotes is Emily Lay. She created a line of planners and she has books and talks about living a simplified life. And one of the things she says, I may botch this a little bit, but that she strives to live a life of grace, not perfection. And so you just really have to give yourself grace in those moments where you don't think you can make it through. Just stop, take a deep breath, find little things that give you joy and just make it to the next moment. And then another piece of that would, if you have the support around you of your family, of your friends, of coworkers, whoever it may be, even strangers in a Facebook group or on a blog or a message board, take the help, talk to people. If you are able to, if it's available to you, if you can afford it, go to therapy. There's always kind of I feel like somewhat of a stigma around it. I think we're doing better as a society with mental health, but if you have access to that and you can do it, go talk to somebody. There is no shame in having, an outsider's perspective, somebody that's objective and can really help you focus on, that next thing that you want to do, of getting through your grief in that moment. But I would really say those two things, just give yourself lots and lots of grace, make it through the moments, just one at a time. It can all seem overwhelming, but just a little bit at a time, and then take that support from the people around you. And then eventually you will be able to make it through a conversation like this without breaking down or, you'll be able to look back at some of the things that you went through and think of them not fondly, because obviously that's not an easy time, but you think of them with an appreciation for where you were and where you are. And then you can use that to help somebody else. And another quote that I love and is kind of my mantra, I guess, if you will. Robin Roberts says this, and I think I don't know if her mom said it or if it was something she started saying when she was going through cancer and trying to help other people. But she says, turn your mess into your message. And that's, we all have them, whether it's fertility struggles or, losing a child or divorce or death of a parent or whatever it may be. We all have a mess. But you can take that and you can learn and you can grow and you can turn it into a message to help somebody else eventually and be, a light for somebody else. I think that's so important. God gives us these things to go through, not only for us to make us stronger, but I truly believe to share and so that we can help others that are faced with similar situations.
I've convinced us that not to believe in perfection, but definitely, life hands you just about anything, whether you're prepared for it or not. And it's how you deal with it that makes you become the stronger person that you are in the end. And you just never know. And so you can't prepare for the unknown. But like I said, it's all in how you deal with it. And you will find, I say all the time, I'm a very willful person. And where there's a will, there's a way. And I always find a way, even when I think there's absolutely nothing I can do. I still find a way to deal with it or figure it out, whatever it is. So I know that is it paraprofessional?
Yep, paraprofessional.
For kindergarten. What's your next step?
Well, I want to continue with that. I'm hopefully going to be getting my teaching certification. I also it was kind of born out of the pandemic. I started a little homemade jewelry line that, I do just for fun and make bracelets and necklaces and whatnot for friends and family. And
I saw the stackable bracelets.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, I mean, did I do a little mini, social media stalk? I sure did. You know what I mean? And I saw them in the bracelet. I saw all the pictures. Like, wow, It's so beautiful.
Oh, wait. Thank you.
Well, give what is your business name? Give it a shout out.
Well, it's Lindsey Brown Designs. I took a little hiatus over the holidays with Instagram because Instagram is like a crazy place to garner business. And I got so many orders that I got a little bit overwhelmed. So I completed all those and then I turned it inactive for just a little bit so I could catch my breath. But I'm on Facebook as well, Lindsey Brown Designs. And yeah, I do custom bracelets and things like that. And I'm actually branching out a little bit more into that. And I think I've been talking to not a friend yet, but she's becoming a friend to help me with the website that we can do a blog and the jewelry there together so you could shop from the website. But I really feel like, I want to get more stories out there of motherhood and people that have dealt with things. So we're going to be working on a website and we think we're going to call it The Messy Mama. I've kind of dabbled with that for a few years just because I've loved that quote, but I think that's what we're going to go with, and have people talk to people who have had messy situations that they've come out the other side. So that's something that I'll work on probably more this summer when I have some time off of school and be able to do that. Nothing that, I'm looking to make a business out of or get 1 million followers, but just something to share my heart and for it to have its own little space to live on the internet. So,
well, you never know, because if it hadn't been for Hadassah creating the B Team on Facebook and me after having an 8-year hiatus off Facebook, I would never have connected with her. And then she had to have one basically really crappy night. And she called me out of the blue, having only seen my name so many times in her feed. And then we talk every single day. And now we have a podcast and like all the things, so
it's funny how life takes you places. But yeah, I just, it's a way to share my heart and hopefully help people. But who knows what it could turn into. So I'm just kind of going every day, trying to appreciate what's in front of me right now and move forward to helping people. I would say long-term goal would be eventually to start a nonprofit to raise money to help people who lose children, to help pay for some of the expenses that they go through, because we didn't realize, I touched on it earlier, that the funeral home here in our town covered those costs for us. But I know that's a rarity, and funerals are so expensive, and, headstones are so expensive. And I just really feel like those children deserve a proper remembrance and a proper spot if their family chooses to do that, for them to go and visit. And, there's places where, if people don't have the money for those grave markers, that, there's like the children's section of the cemetery and they just have these plain little markers. And it just breaks my heart that we all take it for granted, but something as simple as money could hinder somebody having what they feel like would be a proper resting place for their loved one. So I would love to do that eventually.
Well, that gives me goosebumps. Like, that's inspiring, that you want to go into a business with that in mind. It's really inspiring to hear that.
Thank you. I mean, that's just a purpose, I think, that comes from the pain. My friend Jessica that I told you guys about, her brother lived in New Mexico, and he was a veteran and was really great about helping elderly people or single moms that needed help with groceries. He would deliver groceries, and been close to 2 years now. He was out delivering groceries, and he was in a horrible car accident and was killed. And when they went to go claim his car, they found more groceries in there. So he was on his way to deliver to somebody else. But she's now started, it's called Matthew's Blessing Box. And it's a box that you can donate food and different items for people that might be in need. And they just come and take what they need. That was her purpose that was born out of pain. And that's what she does to give back and honor him. So I feel like we all kind of have that a little bit. And how far you want to take that is completely up to you. And so she's really been a driving force to me of, okay, what could I do to give back and honor him in that way as well? So,
wow, I just love it. I love all of this. We absolutely love having you on. Maybe, with these new ventures, can have you back on, because you do have a lot to say and it's very encouraging. And I know we'll get feedback from the listeners as well, and they may have questions. So, if it's all right with you, we might reach out to you again and say, hey, could you help us with this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am an open book. And if there's something that I didn't touch on that somebody would want to discuss, I'm fully open to that.
That's so sweet.
I don't want to wrap it up, but just thank you so much. Like, I know you have kids and a life, so.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's such an honor to, you think your own story, nobody wants to hear that, but you really validated within me that, no, maybe this is something that might help somebody else. So it's really an honor to be able to share that. And hopefully it just helps one person that may be struggling with fertility or with a loss or something like that. Then it's all worth it to talk about.
I look forward to just seeing you on social media. It's like, you're just a really strong, beautiful woman. And that's like so precious these days. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
I was going to say, what's your Instagram handle? Or is that on like the DL for right now, or do you want to give a shout out?
No, not at all. My Instagram is Lindsey Lee Brown, LindseyLeigh, and then just regular old Brown. We're pretty plain around here. So yeah, I need to get better about that. I will take so many pictures and then I forget to post stuff. And I'm bad about not being in the pictures. I take them of everybody else. So I need to get better about that. That's a goal, not a resolution. I don't really like resolutions, but that's a goal for this year is to
there you go.
hear more.
No, love it. Absolutely love it. Well, definitely thank you. And we will reach out to you again and have you back on. I'm glad that you were able to tell your story. And I think it will definitely resonate with a lot of people. All right. Well, thank you, Lindsey. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Lindsey's story this week. We want to invite you on our show to share your voice or story, just like Lindsey got to do today. We all have something in our lives that are relatable to others or unique in our own ways, and we encourage you to reach out to us so that you can come on our podcast. You can find us on social media at abitabovepod, or you can email us at abitabovepod@gmail.com. We put out episodes each Wednesday and Friday, so subscribe to our podcast to get notified when new episodes come out. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on Wednesday.